video, like hearing those lyrics, he's running around with like uncooked pasta shells in his pockets.
Okay, I get where you're coming
like,
from.
Like manicotti.
Just uncooked manicotti.
Yeah, just in the music, and he just like throws them.
I mean, I went a different way. I feel like he was talking about seashells, and I thought he was just walking around the beach, and he was like, got hit by a huge wave, and that's why his pockets are full of shells.
But it like loses its hardness. Like
if he got hit by a big wave,
like walking
and he's
around
got pockets
like,
full of shells,
like seashells.
But you think it's more hard if he's walking around with uncooked manicotti in his pockets?
I mean, at the beach, you'd expect seashells in your pocket, right?
Yeah.
But like some dude rolling up on you on the street, last thing you'd ever expect is like a pocket full of manicotti. and some dude just pulls out manicotti. I'm not fucking with that guy.
It just cold cocks you with his manicotti.
Yeah, just fucking cold cocks you, and just like rigatoni just goes flying out of like your
out of your pockets because you had rigatoni in your pockets. I think that's how Italians fight. Like fucking Sonic and all the rings would pop up. It's that, but with manicotti shells.
Just rigatoni, manicotti just flies everywhere.
Penne. Yeah, all that shit.
What's your favorite type of shell?
Favorite type of shell? So
if you're having a pasta, if you're having good pasta.
Just like a regular pasta, not necessarily a shell. Penne is always my go-to. It's hearty. It's easy to eat.
Which one's that? Is that the?
It's like the long one with the circle in the middle, and they kind of like are cut like a little angle.
Like little rivets in it.
No rivets.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But you always make your Cajun pasta with. Yeah, that thing.
Yeah, because that's, like I said, it's a hearty noodle. It tracks well going down the esophagus. Don't necessarily have a risk of choking on it typically, unlike a regular spaghetti noodle. Like you don't chew that thing the whole way. I mean, that thing's just a 7-inch long noodle, and it's halfway down your neck veins there. And
that'd be a horrible way to go. Choking on a spaghetti noodle.
That would be a terrible way to go.
You
ever have like a mozzarella stick and like that shit happens to you? Like you eat like half of the mozzarella stick and like it goes down and like it's
still connected.
It's still connected and you're like, and then you have a crucial decision to make. Do I finish this whole mozzarella stick in one gulp, or do I somehow try to break this thing off and slurp it down?
It's true. It happened to me not too long ago.
Just yesterday, actually.
Oh god, dude, mozzarella sticks I could crush. The best mozz sticks are like the ones that are like Rocky's Pizza.
Blue and Gray Bar and Grill up in Gettysburg. They're like little wedges. They're like mozzarella stick wedges, but they actually have like 5 different cheeses in them. Did you just like get a fat sweat there a little bit?
I did.
Welcome to Shadows and Sightings, the paranormal podcast, where we talk about random nonsense for 10 minutes and then get into the podcast. I'm Taylor.
I'm Nick.
And today we're talking about the Lost Colony of Roanoke. Roanoke down in North Carolina. Mighty good state down there. Mighty good state, sir.
They have good donuts. And have you ever Outer Banks?
I've never been.
Oh, man.
Never been there.
There's a place down there called Duck Donuts.
The podcat is back. He's here to hang out.
Podcat Noodle.
He's back to hang out. But yeah, we're talking Lost Colony of Roanoke since we're getting close to Thanksgiving here in the United States. Yeah. We figured what better way to talk about turkeys and pilgrims and football than with the greatest American mystery of all time.
I wouldn't say that's the greatest American mystery of all time.
What do you think is the greatest American mystery?
JFK.
That's not really a mystery.
It is a mystery.
That's not really a mystery. Lee Harvey Oswald did it. They just don't know.
Presumably, Lee Harvey Oswald did it. Presumably. It could have been aliens. It could have.
You think aliens?
I would not
blasted a hole through RFK's brain.
Absolutely.
JFK's brain.
Could have been. It could have been the mafia. It could have been.
It could have been the mafia. Could have been Marilyn Monroe
controlled by aliens. It could have been. We don't know. Who's to know? Who's to know?
I think it was Lee.
It probably was Lee Harvey Oswald. but
I like how he was just the fall guy, though. Like, no matter what, he was just like, yeah, I did it, I guess.
I think the part that like makes it so suspicious, though, is the way that he died.
That's the part. How did he die?
He was walking out of the courthouse after being it was either he was walking out of the courthouse after being sentenced for the death of JFK, or he was walking out of like they had him held in the jail and they were like going to transport him to the courthouse, but he was in police custody. He's walking out, and then the club owner guy, I forget his name.
Big Tony.
Essentially, Big Tony, yeah.
Hey, you're the one that killed JFK. Pat, 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 pat.
Basically, yeah. He just walks up, broad daylight, just like shoots him right there, like in front. Jack Kirby, I think it might have been Jack Kirby. I think it was his name.
No, he's a comic book writer.
Jack Kirby, yeah, he is a comic book writer.
He created Thanos.
Yeah, Jack Kirby. Yeah. But some stereotypical 1960s name like Jack Kirby, basically. Like, just broad daylight, just shoots him, kills him right then.
You think that's a bigger mystery than the Lost Colony of Roanoke?
Well, I mean, it's pretty impactful, I guess.
It's impactful, sure.
Because like the Lost Colony of Roanoke,
112 to 121 colonists just vanished.
But that's like
off the face of the earth. They could have been aliens. It could have been the mafia. Could have been aliens mafia.
It could have been. It could have been a time slip. They could have been transported to another dimension.
Could have been a time warp.
Time warp. Could have been cannibalism. Could have been. I don't know, but we'll get more into the theories about like the
into your ideas of what could have happened.
Oh, I'm about to light this shit up, bro.
Are you?
Oh yeah. I'm gonna tell you right here, right now, I fucking know what happened to Roanoke.
All right, well, get into it, man. Tell us the deets. What do you got?
All right, so Roanoke, 1587. Around, we'll just say between like 1580s, because kind of like looking at the research, it wasn't like it was like one singular I mean, they vanished, of course, but I don't think what people understand is like the whole events of Roanoke kind of happens over the course of like 4 or 5 years or whatever.
Right.
So you got to think during this time frame, this is like 100. So when did Christopher Columbus
sailed the ocean blue in 1492?
1492. So roughly almost 100 years later after Columbus's,
famed voyage where he found the new land.
Basically. So
fuck that guy.
It's just a freaking monster. This is, prior to, the American colonists trying to come over here and colonize.
Yeah, this is actually because Jamestown was the first official colony, and that wasn't until 1607.
Roanoke was more or less like a failed experiment.
It was the beta trial.
It was like the trial. Yeah,
they were soft launching it, working out the bugs.
Yeah,
if a couple colonists die, whatever.
The kinks, yeah, exactly, pretty much. 1587. They established on Roanoke Island, which is modern day North Carolina. That area,
somewhere in there, yeah.
Somewhere. Roanoke is considered Carolina, right? Or is there a Roanoke, Virginia?
There is.
But is there also a Roanoke, Carolina?
I believe so.
Because I always thought it was Roanoke, Virginia. But apparently it's not. It's like right on the cusp of like the Carolinas. And it's like modern day.
Well, it says that Roanoke Colony was founded by the Governor Ralph Lane in 1585 on Roanoke Island in present day Dare County, North Carolina.
Okay. So we'll just Carolina.
I mean, you're not wrong. It's pretty close.
It's like right on the border, isn't it? Like a little north of Carolina. So all right, so Carolina. I guess there is like a Roanoke, Virginia. Maybe there's not.
Yeah, there is.
There's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought
there's not a Roanoke, North Carolina.
There's not.
I think what you're thinking is there's Roanoke, Virginia, yes, but there's not a Roanoke, North Carolina, from what I understand. But there's the guy who actually sent the voyage over. His name was Raleigh, like his last name was Raleigh, but there's a Raleigh, North Carolina.
Maybe that's what it is.
So take that for what you want.
Sure. I know, just like if we hop on 81, we all in 81 South, we see the signs that say like Roanoke or whatever. Yeah, so established in 1585, 87, that mid 1580s. Mm-hmm. around 115 settlers, women and children. And essentially Roanoke was like the first attempt of what I say like the New World. So I'm thinking like, England, coming over here, trying to establish a colony in the United States.
Yeah, and if you're an American listener to this show, you know exactly what that means. Establishing the New World.
This is like pre-Revolutionary War.
But it's colonialism. It's very primitive, very like we have colonial Williamsburg. It's not that far away from us. Essentially that.
Yeah,
it's just
essentially.
Very early America.
So John White, he's going to be a prominent figure, and
he's going to be a problem.
No,
John White, he's going to be a problem.
No, John White, he's a very prominent figure in like the Roanoke, storyline. Essentially, he's like the captain. I believe he was the captain of the ship. He wasn't the mayor, but he was like the next in like command, like the captain of like of the voyage and all that.
Actually, he ties into so it's Sir Walter Raleigh is the guy that sent John White.
Was Raleigh the mayor?
He was a sir.
He was a sir. Okay.
He was sent to establish the city of Raleigh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they get here, they start, settling in, and for whatever reason, maybe because they didn't plan it well or whatever, he essentially had, we have to return to England to get supplies and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that's around like what, 1588, 89, something like that. So prior to him leaving, there was I'm assuming there's like a little island off of like, or then what was Roanoke, called CROATOAN. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that they had there was some agreement where, hey, if for whatever reason you come back to the settlement, look for us on CROATOAN Island or CROATOAN. Okay, that's like a perfect,
that makes sense to me.
Makes sense. Yeah, solid proof plan. If I don't find it here, I'll go over there.
Yeah.
So he leaves.
He leaves in 1588.
He leaves in 1588. With the intention of returning back. However, he gets delayed, the Anglo-Spanish War, and his intention of coming straight back after a resupply gets delayed by like 2 years. So he finally makes his way back to Roanoke, and by this time it's like 1590, 1591, something like that. And he finds the settlement completely abandoned. There's no... At first, there's like no sign of like any sort of struggle. There's no sign of like war or anything like that, like a raid or anything.
Right.
He did notice that the fortress, the settlement was like barricaded.
Right. Like fortified.
Like reinforced and fortified. But other than that, there were no obvious signs of like a struggle or anything. The only thing that he had found that he kind of noticed was there was a tree that had the word CROATOAN etched in it. Mm-hmm. Which I'm assuming in his mind is thinking, oh, okay, this is like...
that's their sign of being like, okay, we left.
Yeah, look for us on like CROATOAN or whatever. He never actually gets the chance to investigate that lead any further. I believe a hurricane came through, and because of that, he had to like abandon his search or whatever. So then he returns to England without actually verifying if they ever made it to CROATOAN, the island or whatever, to check with settlers.
Yep, he had to return back to England before he could get there. It makes me wonder how far away that island was from Roanoke.
Is it not like a modern...
I don't think it's a modern place. I don't think you can visit it. But it had to have been close enough that the colonists could have feasibly went there on foot.
Well, Hatteras Island, I guess, is what is... Like if you look up CROATOAN Island now, Hatteras Island comes up. Yeah, and I think I had read that that was the gist behind it, where it was close enough to where they were going to use it as like a docking point essentially, and they had like little skiffs being able to run back and forth to do like little mini supply runs and stuff like that, which was like the strategical advantage of like docking there at CROATOAN Island.
Right,
I think is what was like the game plan behind that. But of course, we never really understood or got the chance to see if that lead turned anywhere because a hurricane came through supposedly, and it kind of prevented him from actually going out there to see. So then he just like turned back to England or whatever. So then, of course, however many hundreds of years later, Roanoke has been an iconic, it's called now like the Lost Colony, and there have been, speculations, theories, and some of them get pretty wild.
Some of them do.
Like pretty bizarre, far-fetched out there as to like what happened to this lost colony. It's crazy to think, though, too, that this was like around the time of King Henry VIII. I didn't like put two and two together. It's like Queen Elizabeth, so I'm not sure if by this point, if King Henry was still alive. I'm going to probably say no, because I believe Queen Elizabeth was probably the one that actually pushed, like, for the, kind of gave like the green light for this to go through.
He was dead before this. He died in 1547.
Okay. All right. So then.
So about 40 years after.
40 years after. And
that is crazy, though, that it's so close together. Like, that's the Renaissance era, I guess, isn't it? Like, American colonization and the Renaissance era is happening almost at the same time.
Yeah. So well, I mean, it was more or less during Elizabeth's reign. Her dad was, King Henry was that was like the Renaissance era when he was in power. So it's kind of like on the tail end. And then, she passes away in 1603. So then it's roughly, 100 years before 1700s, which I guess was what we would consider like the colonial.
I wouldn't.
It's like 1750. Like when did technically the colonial era start?
I would argue that the colonial era pretty much begins after the successful colonization of Jamestown in 1607. So like once that was established and they were able to successfully kind of make that work for however many years.
That's fair. Like colonial America.
Because then you get...
not colonial America.
You get Jamestown, and then that turns into... that essentially just spreads into almost being Virginia. And then, of course, you have Plymouth.
And this is still before the witch trials, right?
Oh, yeah.
When did Salem happen?
1692.
That's wild.
So you're looking almost 80 years before those witch trials happen.
It's like
these colonies start to form.
Yeah.
And then that's why I always think it's crazy how these timelines work out. Because if you think about it, just in a perspective, I thought about it the one day. So from the Salem witch trials to the Civil War is still more time than the Civil War to us now. It's been 161 years since, give or take, depending on what part of it, but about 160 since the Civil War.
For us today.
Yeah. So it's been from the witch trials to the Civil War, 169 years. And it's like, man, it's just wild to think that there was that much time between those two events happening because they seem so close together in a way.
Well, it's crazy. If you think about it too,
it's crazy that it's still, 170 years from 1607 when Jamestown's established to 1776 when the United States becomes an independent country.
I was going to say, it's even crazier to think about this. So we were formed in 1776, so 1876.
That's when the Declaration of Independence was signed on. Yeah.
Which I'm essentially, I consider that pretty much
start.
like the beginning of like the United States.
It's kind of like the start of American history, I guess. But
I think most people would agree that that's like a fair statement that 1776, like our Declaration of Independence, that's when
America's
in its infancy,
country,
essentially. Yeah. Mm-hmm. To 1776, 1886. So what? We've only been a country for 1876.
We're coming up on the 250th anniversary.
Yeah. 250. We even then the Roman Empire is still older than we are as a country.
Oh yeah,
which is insane.
Yeah,
but they have us beat by like 300 some years.
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
That's definitely one of those things, because if you look at it from a biblical standpoint, the Roman Empire was fully like they ran the world when Jesus was alive.
Yeah. They were like top dogs. Like,
it's like, okay, wow, it's weird how some of those timelines just cross over.
I remember like I know we're getting off on a tangent here, but I remember like going to like church sermons. And that was like one of like the
Roman centuries are the ones that stab him and stuff, and
the Romans imprison him and stuff like that. And charge him, and Pontius Pilate is like the guy that condemns him. But
and then like you play Assassin's Creed and you're killing Romans. It's like, wow.
Dante's Inferno, you actually find Pontius Pilate in hell.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
You find him in there, and like you have a chance. You can free him, or you can like condemn him even further, and like you're forced to rot here, or no, like you're forgiven. But it's just like a crazy. Yeah, when the church sermons and like the pastor was like, the Roman Empire, they were much bigger than what the United States was, and it's like, which is crazy to think about it, because now with the world or whatever, there's so many different nations, but no, the Roman Empire, they were like the world.
They started it.
So
Anyways,
back to Jonestown. Back to
Jamestown / Roanoke / early infancy of colonialism.
Yeah. Essentially, they've become like the lost colony. And fast forward to modern day, like now, all we really have are speculation because it was such a long time ago.
Right.
Record keeping.
It literally predates. Like it's the very first attempted colony. So, it predates.
The record keeping was so minimal.
Yeah.
As to like what we actually have today. Mm-hmm. We only have accounts from mostly coming from Jamestown as to like what their speculation was with their like own internal investigations when they came back and they actually settled. And then, modern day here now, we just have theories as to what could have, led to the
not from a lack of trying, though. I mean, they've been doing archaeological research since the 1880s.
Yeah, trying to figure out. Yeah, which I mean, there's some pretty new developments.
Just as recently as 2020.
Yeah. I think some of the theories are more believable.
Of course. But it's fun to speculate.
It's for sure.
I mean, to me, the most believable theories are, it was pretty much established that severe droughts in the area when they were starting this colony greatly affected them. So they probably moved somewhere to find a water source. And in the case of trying to find a water source, they got lost in the woods and just died,
Perish. That's one. So I think there are two commonly accepted theories, or at least if there's a theory that's going to be accepted, it's one of these two. So the one that you just described, they had to relocate to try to find fertile land. That way they can continue to grow their crops and stuff and all that and survive. The other one is that they actually assimilated with the local Native Americans. Right.
Just kind of incorporated into their tribes.
Yeah, which that can kind of be taken a couple different ways. So it could have been that, like, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe kind of like warring tribes, maybe they killed off the men and they just took the women and children.
Could have been.
Or it could have been a more peaceful route where they kind of assimilated, the entire like colony or whatever. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I did read was that, so there were two tribes. I don't know if they're like called the CROATOANs or whatever, but there was some tribe native to like the Croat, like what we talked about earlier, like the little mini island Croatoa or whatever. Mm-hmm. And essentially some of the colonizers or the colonists would have assimilated with that tribe. But then there was another tribe local to the area closer to Roanoke where they would have assimilated with them. So the colony kind of got split into two, is the other like commonly accepted. The Croatoan and the Hatteras tribe live nearby, and they were known to have peaceful interactions with the settlers initially, and which makes sense because when White came back, when he had noticed that they were missing, he didn't really see signs of like a struggle or anything like that. Right. And up until that point, there's really no documentation. There's really no reports of the warring, of there being tension between like the tribes and stuff. Mm-hmm. I think much more of like the tension between like Native Americans and colonizers really doesn't come until like later on.
Right. I did see one theory was that maybe these colonists tried to return to England. So they could have attempted to build a boat and sail back, and the ship got lost at sea and all. I mean, it's 120 people. That's probably a regular sized crew for a ship. It's not unbelievable to think that they all could fit on a ship, sail off into the Atlantic, and then just get swept up in a bad storm and lost forever.
You think so? You think they would have had like a ship? Maybe they did, because maybe that was like a prominent thing to have back then as like a trade. I mean, I'm sure it was. Like,
yeah, I mean, no doubt you would have had carpenters, and you would have had. And the way that I kind of would think is when you're going to start a colony, you're going to take people, one, that want to go there, like from England, they're looking for a different way of life, but you're going to look for farmers, you're going to look for people that at least have some idea of medicine.
Skill set, like a certain skill set.
Right. Carpenters, stone workers, those kind of like those trades, those big trades that would help establish a community and keep it propped up and running. So to think that you wouldn't have at least one or two people there that could feasibly build a ship, because I mean, you start this colony, the first thing you're probably going to want to do is build ships to go fishing.
Build ships, boats. Yeah, no, I mean, it wouldn't, I completely agree. It wouldn't surprise me if if you had, one or two, and probably more than just like two people who are very well versed in like the.
Right. I mean, back then they were probably jacks of all trades. You had to learn a little bit of something or a little bit of everything to maybe even be considered to go start a colony.
It's like the selection process. All right, what are your skills?
Says here you've been working 10 years as a stone carver. Good. We definitely could use some stone work.
You're good.
And also a couple years as a carpenter. Wow, that's quite impressive. All right. Looks like you've served under the king as a chef. Wow, that's okay. A little Mr. Overqualified here. Also says you were a proctologist.
What?
You sticking your fingers in people, sir? I don't know what you're talking about.
It's just like, all right, you're good to go. Check. And then it says here, you are a jester.
You're in. Get on that boat.
Get on that boat.
He honks his little. I don't know why he's a clown, but he honks his little clown horn.
Yeah,
just walks on. He dies instantly.
Yeah,
in the colony. He's the first one to die.
It's like, a medical doctor from Harvard University.
Harvard's not even a station. You mean like Cambridge?
Cambridge, yeah, we don't need you. I don't know what the selection process would have been like.
I think that it would have just had to have been people wanting to leave for a quote unquote better life. But if you're getting it's like a task force almost. If I'm putting together a team, I'm not going to want 6 jesters and 1 doctor.
No.
I want people that I know that can make this work. And then plus you're probably looking to have at least half and half men and women so that they could all procreate and make more people. Sure. And then your colony gets bigger.
I don't know what the logistics are. I'm sure though that there was probably a very
it's probably was not even like we're like way overthinking it. Yeah. I was like, all right, who wants to go to the New World? And like 6 people raise their hand. All right, get on the boat.
What skills do you have?
I don't have any.
I don't have any.
All right.
I can chop wood though. All right, you're good. You're in.
Do you have any kids?
Nope, no kids.
All right, you're out.
Are you sick? Are you healthy? Yeah, I'm good. I'm healthy. All right, you're in. Yeah, it probably was something like along those lines. I'm not sure what the stipulations were. Yeah, but it's crazy to think about it though. Like, because obviously we were born here, we grew up here, and we're in a very different time frame from when that happened. It must have been terrifying.
Oh, absolutely terrifying.
Terrifying and exciting at the same time, but terrifying coming to this. You don't even know, like leaving England. You have no idea if you're even going to make it to
England. I mean, the New World.
The New World. You have no idea.
Because it's like, what, a 2-month boat ride? Or something like that? Was it? Or 2 weeks? 2 weeks or 2 months? Something like that. It was something.
2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
2 to 3 months, which is even more insane.
That sounds
2
awful.
to 3 months.
That sounds awful.
You could not.
To be on a big, giant wooden crate.
They must have smelled so bad. It must have been. They smelled horrible. The food was probably terrible.
Probably maggots and maggot-infested food. Nothing to drink.
Oh my gosh! Like, I couldn't even imagine.
And then, like, you finally see land, and you set up, and the very first thing that happens is you get raided by Native Americans, and they just take out half of you.
Could you imagine? Give me an Oregon Trail game that's more based along the lines of like leaving England to the New World.
Yeah,
like, I want to play a video game like that. Like,
jeez, yeah.
Oh my gosh, these poor people.
But you're right. I mean, a lot of them are seeking like religious freedom and stuff like that. So it's very exciting at first, I'm sure. Like, we're getting on the boat. We're going to the New World. We're going to find everything we ever could have wanted in this new place. And then you get there and it's just wood line. You land on the beach and then you just see woods.
That's another thing too. Could you imagine like how different the United States, pre-colonial to the U.S., like what it actually looked like, North America?
Yeah.
No roads.
No buildings.
No buildings. No, just literally forest and tree line everywhere.
Yep. abundant natural resources, I guess, is the one thing. But yeah, that's why most of them would stay close to the oceans, because I mean, you venture into the woods too far, you're likely going to get fucked up by something. Like animal attacks, Native American attacks.
It essentially would have been like the Pine Barrens across the entire like East Coast.
Go to any national park.
Essentially,
where it's still protected,
and it would have been that everywhere.
From as far as you could go.
Oh my gosh.
No modern amenities at all. Like even England had rudimentary, like imagine going from where England is at this point, at least mostly civilized. I mean, like it's very,
a lot of castles and a lot of like,
castles, but buildings, cobblestone roads, carriages, this and that. And then you go to this new place and you're living in a fucking thatch roofed log house that sleeps 2 people, but there's 15 people inside of it.
Just like,
And like you said, I mean, you're digging trenches to shit in. It just smells terrible. You can't bathe. It's
everything out in the forest is like trying to eat you.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not everything.
Almost everything.
But
not to get too far off the topic here. So to kind of recap, so Roanoke is founded, quote unquote, founded 1585, and it's gone by 1590. So 5 years.
A very short amount of time. Yes. Yeah. It's for whatever reason, the colony's gone. It's
3 years after that's essentially founded, the guy goes back to get more supplies.
Gets delayed because of the war between the Spanish and the English.
Comes back 2 years after that, and it's gone.
Gone. The only thing he has to go on is CROATOAN etched in the tree. And for him to go and search that lead, he's unable to do so because a hurricane kind of comes through. He gets rerouted back to England and kind of just fizzles out. Never like, I don't really think the investigation or anything really takes place until Jamestown gets founded, and they kind of pick up where that trail kind of went cold. And then they have their own speculations, and then modern day, now we have all the theories as what we have today.
Right. So let's talk about some of those theories. Any good juicy ones that you have? Like we said, the most logical ones are, one, they assimilated with Native American tribes, just integrated in with them, moved on, left the colony behind, and essentially started a new life with the Native Americans. Yep. Another possible explanation could have been they were just decimated by Native Americans, could have just been a raid. Yep. And the Native Americans, I mean, could have just taken their bodies and dumped them in the ocean or something. I mean, like you said, there was no sign of a struggle, but that doesn't mean that there was not a struggle.
Sure. Yeah.
They could have night raided them and just came in and just slit their throats as they were sleeping. Who knows?
The thing about that is there have been no remains found.
Right. But I mean, again, they could have taken them with them and just put them in a big burn pile.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, like,
could have dumped them into the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
that's one of the theories.
Because you think about it, I mean, if this guy leaves in 1588, and this attack happens then, and he comes back 3 years later, if those bodies have been in the ocean for 3 years, they are not going to be anywhere near where they were.
Them, yeah. So those are the two like more commonly, and here and there they find like little bits of like evidence that possibly, they find remains that could identified or could have been identified as like remaining colonists or whatever that were buried. The thing is, when archaeologists are looking for burial sites for Roanoke or the Lost Colony, what they're expecting to see is they're looking for like actual graves essentially, and they're trying to see like if they find a person, how were they buried. So they're expecting to find somebody buried in like a supine position with like their arms kind of crossed and folded, because that was kind of the expectation of like when you bury somebody back then, that's what they were expecting. They would have been lying either facing north or east, I think.
Okay.
They haven't found anything like that.
Okay.
To this day.
Interesting.
So after those two theories, like things they kind of turn. They kind of get a little wild, of course. And with these, outlandish theories, there's really not a whole lot to kind of go on. So it's like all speculation.
Right.
Of course, there's the whole. One of them was alien abduction. the entire colony was abducted by aliens, which would explain why we have found 0 remains. Would also account for the fact that when White came back to the colony, he found no signs of like a struggle, so they were just like initially like beamed up. There's no like evidence of a struggle. There's no trace or anything like that. But of course, you can throw in some things that kind of like counteract that. If that were the case, why then or how would somebody like have inscribed like CROATOAN?
Right.
You know, and like the
I just like the idea that somebody's writing crow in the tree because they found like the tree that's a crow on it, right? Yeah. And then like you see the O and then like it just up the tree.
Just like a knife mark.
Yeah.
It's really funny though that's one of the theories. I remember Fallout 3. I think it was Fallout 3, I'm pretty sure. There was a DLC expansion called Mothership Zeta, which was essentially you pick up this radio signal and you follow it and you find this like dead alien body and you get abducted by like this alien like colony. And on the ship, you could find these recordings that these aliens were like doing these experiments on these people that they were capturing. I can't remember if it was Roanoke specifically, but you find a recording of a colonial era American essentially saying like, I've been suspended in like the ether and I'm just looking down on our planet or whatever. And I can't remember if he was like from Jamestown or like Roanoke or whatever, but it's like clearly he's like from a colony or something like that. And it's just crazy how like that kind of comes into play. But of course, I think aliens are always going to come into play as like a theory for when things kind of are like mysterious and there's like odd disappearances, because it makes sense, right? Like our understanding of what like an alien abduction is, there's no trace. It's just you're beamed out of like your own room or whatever. There's like no sign of a struggle.
I seen one was the colony was swallowed by a sinkhole. Like they're all just chilling there one day and then all of a sudden it just like neatly folds back over itself and just the guy gets back. What the hell?
Okay. All right.
In this case, the crow, the knife mark's going down.
It's like, okay, well then some of these are like, you can just kind of keep poking holes in. Okay, well fine, they all left, but why is the fortress still standing there?
Right. Why is there, if that sinkhole happens, like wouldn't they have some sort of archaeological evidence that the ground was not the same? Like a sinkhole, I don't know how it would cover itself back over, but the dirt would be different, right?
Maybe.
I'm not an archaeologist, so I don't know.
Geologist. Who studies sinkholes? Is it a geologist? Maybe a geologist.
I like this one. You ready for this one?
Okay.
Some speculate the colonists may have intentionally sailed to the mythological location of Atlantis.
It was the plan the whole time. Like there was like this
like they all get off the boat. He's like, all right, guys, start the colony. I'll be back to check on you in 2 years. And they all just collectively are like, okay, we'll see you then. And as soon as they see the boat hit the horizon, they don't see it anymore. All right, guys, get the shit together. We got to get to Atlantis.
It was like a task force, like a sub-task force, like created by Queen Elizabeth.
One of them is an Atlantean.
It's just like Queen Elizabeth like met with this like subgroup, this sub-task force. Like, we have reason to believe that Atlantis is real. Like, no, fuck the New World. We don't want that.
Your mission, if you choose to accept it.
Yeah, like we're going to Atlantis, baby.
Contact the Atlantean government. Find out what their plans are, and then destroy them.
There's another theory that the colony was kind of forced to participate in cannibalism.
Okay.
Which that, honestly, I wouldn't be super surprised.
Yeah.
If that was the case.
Yeah.
Because you got to think, if White was leaving on like a supply run, I'm assuming he Like if I'm going to leave on a supply run and I know it takes 3 months to get to England.
It's essentially a half-year trip.
A half year to coming back. I'm going to assume that, okay, looking at my rations and my supplies a year out or whatever, I have about a year left of reserves. I'm going to leave now to kind of compensate for that. And it could have been that maybe they just too quickly burned through their reserves and they essentially had to kind of resort to cannibalism. But of course, that theory only goes so far because they haven't found like any remains as far as we know. You think the one that you read about, the Atlantean one, was crazy. This one I've heard about before too is
hit me.
It's put forth by the Zombie Research Society.
Oh God.
And there is actually a theory floating around that a zombie outbreak happened in the colony, which led to cannibalism. And of course, their strongest piece of evidence is like, well, no bodies have been found because it was a zombie outbreak.
Because they all ate each other?
Because they all ate each other.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Once the zombies ran out of colonists to feed on, the theory goes, they themselves decomposed into the ground, leaving no evidence behind. Because, you know, when you're a zombie and you no longer have food, you just break down and die.
That is true. That's not something I would really think about. You're like every zombie movie ever, like if once all the zombies are zombies, what happens? They can't feed anymore. What happens to them?
But they're not really feeding because they're hungry.
What are they feeding for?
Isn't it just like
Gotcha.
Well, no, because if you watch like other zombie movies, they're kind of just mindlessly walking around the streets and stuff.
Right.
It's not. It's like
it's because there's a food source there it's an instinct.
No, it's almost like they're not really aware of a food source until they see it. Like they see the stimulus of like a person walking around, then it registers, oh, I can eat that or whatever. But up until that like stimulus is like activated, they're kind of just like mindlessly walking around. It's not like they're actively pursuing hunger. Like they're not going through door to door knocking, like, is there a person in here, like searching for it? They're kind of just like wandering around the streets minding their own damn business.
What are your thoughts on Roanoke? What do you think happened?
I think honestly I think they were just assimilated.
Yeah.
Honestly, that of the 115 or whatever, some of them, when you kind of get in that situation of like desperation, I think it's a natural instinct for people to kind of start making like executive like decisions. So White leaves, somebody was probably in charge.
Right.
Maybe they had their own form of like government or democracy or whatever. So, you know, okay, we're gonna cast the votes or whatever to kind of figure out how to like get past the situation. Mm-hmm. So maybe some of them kind of went their own separate ways and they're like, we're going to take our chances and we're going to leave. Maybe some of the, and of course with that, I'm sure of the 112, a lot of them probably did like perish and die off by natural causes, starvation, you know, the elements, disease. Some of them probably were assimilated into like some tribes. And I do believe that maybe some of them also did try to stick to the original plan of like, okay, let's go to, you know, Hatteras Island or whatever, CROATOAN or whatever, and have them meet us there. I wouldn't even be surprised if some of them tried to like, you know what, let's go sail back to like the New World, and maybe they were lost at sea.
Yeah.
I would imagine
kind of like a divide and conquer kind of
exactly.
scenario.
You know, like they probably broke up and went their own separate ways. But with the boat thing though, I'm not sure I'd feel too confident trying to build a ship and sail back to like, because that's a 3-month voyage. What's his face left? White left because rations were so low and everything.
Right.
They're kind of doomed from the start, kind of thing.
Well, speaking of that, there was an instance in 1563. French settlers at the failed Charlesford colony on what now is Paris Island in South Carolina built a crude boat and successfully returned to Europe. Alternatively, the Roanoke colonists could have sailed north along the coast in the hopes of making contact with the English fishing fleets in the Gulf of Maine. If there's an instance that they knew of, I don't know how wide that information would have been known, that in 1563, 20 years prior, colonists from another failed colony tried to escape back to Europe, and they did. So maybe once things got dire, they're like, hey, what about those French guys that made this work? Maybe we can do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. You say Paris Island? Mm-hmm. Isn't that like where the Marines train modern day? Like, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yep. Yep, sure is.
My dad told me so many stories about that place. Like, he's like, yep, they shipped me off to Paris Island. It's just like...
I guess one of the hangups with that theory of them going by ship back to England would have been that the boat that they built would have needed provisions for them to get back, like supplies, and they were already low on supplies as it was. So for them to build a boat filled with supplies needed to get back to England for 2 months is almost impossible. So
yeah, it's not. I don't know. You could literally, because we're not gonna ever really have. I am thoroughly convinced that people will continue to search for the truth for the Lost Colony, but it's so far back in time, and there's so much little written documentation and timeline that we're never going to know. We'll truly never know.
Some believe that it was also a conspiracy against Raleigh himself, who decided that they were just going to maroon the colonists, and the purpose was to undermine Walter Raleigh, whose activities supposedly interfered with, I guess, some England powers that be, to turn England into a Protestant world power at the expense of Spain and other Catholic nations. Anthropologist Lee Miller proposed that Sir Francis Walsingham and some other guys participated in a conspiracy to maroon the colonists left at Roanoke. The purpose was to undermine Raleigh, who supposedly wanted to make England a Protestant world power instead of a Catholic one.
Which wouldn't be surprised, because Queen Elizabeth was like super gung-ho, heavy, like Catholic. And she was not a fan of like Protestants.
Right.
Like, so yeah, sure. That's a stretch. That's a lot of like manpower if you think about it, to like.
I don't know how the colonists factor into whether like, yeah, well, we're just going to leave them there, but.
I mean, I get where he's coming from as far as like, yeah, sure. That's a possibility. I think logically though, if you kind of just look at like the economic, the good old fashioned, like, just going to your neighbor, who are the neighbors at the time? It's the Native American tribes in the area.
Yeah.
And that tied in with the fact, like, if White came back and you saw that like the fort was like dismantled, ransacked, whatever, then okay, it's okay. Clearly it was like a war or something, like a fight or whatever happened here. But the thing that was pristine, as far as we know, there really wasn't. And also too, that's just based off of his reports. Like,
right, true.
Like, and that's like, what, 400 some years ago?
Yeah.
Like, who's to say that he just didn't come back? And maybe it was like torn or whatever, but for whatever reason, they're like,
he was just like, doesn't look like any instructions here.
Exactly. It's like, let's
Well, and that could have gone, there's another theory that it was a Spanish attack.
Yeah, I did see that one. Yep.
So Spanish forces knew of England's plans to establish a new Virginia base, and they were looking for it before those colonists even arrived. But the Spanish Empire had included most of Northern America in their Florida claim and didn't recognize England's right to colonize Roanoke or the Chesapeake Bay. I don't know if it's our Chesapeake Bay or if it's in North Carolina Chesapeake Bay.
I think I looked it up. I think it is our Chesapeake Bay area, because it's not far from it's only like 3 some hours away.
Yeah,
3 or 4 hours away.
Gotcha.
So I think what we consider the Chesapeake Bay is what essentially the same thing as what they were considering.
I guess one of the plot holes in that, or pinholes that you can poke in that theory, was that the Spanish documents were saying that they were still searching for the colony near that area as late as 1600. So apparently they didn't even know what happened to it.
I have no idea. Yeah.
So,
which also goes back to the original theory that there was no, we could clearly see that there was evidence of a ransack, they were invaded or something by the Spanish. The fort would have been torn to shreds.
Right. Unless you're trying to avoid a war with Spain, in which case, if they attack one of your colonies, that's going to pretty much guarantee you're going to have a war.
Well,
so if he goes back and he's like, "Oh, well, the Spanish probably did this," there's probably evidence that if it was a Spanish attack, he knew what the consequences would have been, and maybe he just was like, maybe.
I see what you're saying. So he comes back. He clearly sees that. Oh, this was a Spanish attack.
This is an act of war.
But he doesn't want to report it though, because he's like, yeah, this could
pop off.
Yeah, exactly.
And ruin everything.
Yeah, that sure.
My whole plan of making this a Protestant New World.
That's one. Yeah, that's a plausible theory. Also, too, though, I don't know. Even if it was an act of war, Do you think the Spanish would have been like because they're still civilized? Like they're European Spanish, the Spaniards, they're, I would say, just as civilized as the New World, as like the English are or whatever.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Very religious as well. I don't think they would put it past themselves to like not give these people like proper burials.
I mean, yes,
and stage it as something else.
At the same token, Spain is a Catholic nation. If these are all Protestants.
No, England's a Catholic nation. Queen Elizabeth was very Catholic. Right. She doesn't agree with.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But these guys were supposedly Protestants. That's one of the theories.
Okay.
So if they're Catholics and they're attacking, and they hate each other because they're Protestants,
they're looking at them like they're scum. They're like, hey, we're not going to give you like a proper.
Exactly.
Fuck off. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah. Ooh, did we just solve it?
Did we just do something?
I think we solved it. We did it. Call the president.
Who needs hundreds of years of archaeological explanation?
We know what happened to Roanoke. Who the fuck is it?
Oh shit, the FBI's here.
It's like, you gotta come with us. You just had to keep fucking digging, didn't you?
You sons of bitches.
You had one job, and that was to keep your fucking mouth shut.
I'm so sorry. We didn't know. We didn't know we'd accidentally find the truth. So what about pop culture? I think that you mentioned it once. Didn't you say that there was something that it was in a game?
No, I played Fallout, and you find a recording thing.
Oh yeah, right.
But I don't know if it was Roanoke or if it was something else. I just remember it was like clearly like a colonist or whatever.
Right.
He's like.
So it was featured in 2011 American Horror Story. The episode Birth relates a fictional legend in which the lost colonists mysteriously died, and their ghosts haunted the local Native Americans until a tribal elder banished them with the word CROATOAN. The premise is expanded upon in the 6th season, where American Horror Story Roanoke, they did a whole season about it, which presents a series of fictional television programs documenting encounters with the ghost colonists.
I remember they were in Supernatural as well.
Were they?
Oh, don't quote me on this.
I won't, because I'm looking at it right now, so I'll see what you know.
Because this was like 10 years ago when I saw this. But from what I remember, they go to a town. It had something to do with like actual like demons, like a deal with like the devil or some shit like that. I want to say the entire town actually disappears. And that's all they find is like the word CROATOAN like on a tree.
I was going to say, just looking at it, CROATOAN also appears in a 2005 television series Supernatural. So
that's what I'm talking about. Supernatural. Yeah. Like it
doesn't really give you any details on what actually happened with the town.
It's like I said, it's been a really long time since I've seen it, but I think it's essentially what it was.
You weren't too far off though with that plot of a 1994 graphic novel, Batman and Spawn, War Devil, where CROATOAN is the name of a powerful demon who in the 20th century attempts to sacrifice the entirety of Gotham City to Satan.
Close enough, maybe. I don't know.
CROATOAN seems to be more pop culture than the colony of Roanoke itself, for whatever reason.
I'm not surprised though, if you think about it. Because like that, it's literally the only clue of what the fuck could have happened to these people.
Yeah.
Because you can interpret that for like, there's the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. In 2015, The Last American Vampire, the colonists are victims of a vampire named Crowley. The inscription CRO was thus an implication or an attempt to implicate him. So, theory that they were killed by a vampire. That's kind of cool.
That's neat.
That's kind of cool. That's the one I believe now.
All right, if I had to choose like one of the illogical theories.
Yeah, which one's your favorite illogical theory?
Illogical theory? It's a two-way split. It is a 50-50 between alien abduction.
Of course.
Or a time slip.
Yeah. They
were transported to another dimension.
I like it.
It explains the fact that there's no evidence ever been found. It explains the fact that...
That's it.
Yeah, I don't know. They're all pretty ridiculous. Like,
I think I would like to believe that they looked for Atlantis after they figured out that they weren't going to make it much longer. They're like, well, while we're here, let's go look for Atlantis.
Yeah, the theory of Atlantis would have been, because I don't want to say they were Puritans or whatever, but around that time, It is like the time frame where people are pretty gung-ho religious about, Catholicism, Protestants, and I feel like stories about like Atlantis and stuff like that would have been looked at as like heresy. You think so?
Yeah, it could have been, but I feel like at the same time it's probably just more high fantasy than actual heresy.
I'm saying, like, of those 115 colonists or whatever, like how many of them like actually knew or have even heard of Atlantis because they were so sheltered, right? Like if I'm the church of the time, I don't know, like it's
like I said, I don't think Atlantis is more heresy or witchcraft or anything like that. It's more of just a fantastical tale, a myth that it's out there somewhere. I mean, it's a myth that this new world even exists at this point. Who's to say that Atlantis isn't a part of it? So
that's true. That's a fair point.
Any other thoughts on the Lost Colony of Roanoke?
I've always wanted to go there just to see, like,
it would be cool to figure out, like, I don't know where it is specifically. That would be pretty cool. I wonder if there's any paranormal things that would happen at the supposed site of the Lost Colony of Roanoke.
Like Hatteras or whatever.
Yeah. I wonder if there's any ghostly colonists walking around.
But yeah, no, it'd be cool. Like, it'd be cool to check out. The closest thing that we have came from like the settlers of like Jamestown when they like finally when they came back here and they started their own investigation. And even then, I think it doesn't really start picking up. I thought I read somewhere that the interest in Roanoke didn't really happen until like the 1800s when there was
they started doing archaeological research.
Yeah, like some guy was like, okay, let's figure out what happened or whatever. And like, so by that point,
it's 300 years old at that point.
So yeah, exactly. So, like I saw this other thing that said that, the part of the reason why we haven't really found like any sort of like archaeological evidence is because they were so close to the shoreline that over the course of like 300, 400 years or whatever, erosion has kind of like taken place.
Yeah.
And anything that would have been there has been washed away or whatever because like of erosion.
That's true.
And the ocean line kind of like receding back further.
Storms, hurricanes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
hurricanes, storms, all of that. So I think they were something like what? Like the actual colony itself was only like 928 feet from like the shoreline or whatever.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it wasn't so the course of like 300 years, like it's like receded back, obviously.
I mean, even just for like a local example, Ocean City has to continuously rebuild their shoreline.
Exactly. Yeah. So, this is prior to, so yeah, if there's a very good chance, and that's, which is also a pretty plausible explanation, is the reason why we haven't found any bodies or we haven't found any like sort of like
swept off in the sea.
It's been washed.
Even if they were buried there, they were just,
they're gone now.
Yeah.
Like, so when I read that, I was like, that's actually pretty reasonable to.
Yeah, it's a pretty logical explanation there.
Yeah. I mean, clearly it was aliens, but
Clearly.
What kind of aliens? Like, there's two types of aliens. There's the kinky butt proby ones.
Those ones. They did it.
There's the kinky butt proby ones, and then there's the ones that are like somewhat like humanoid, and they're like, we're not interested in that. We want to help you guys out.
No, I'd like to think that these Puritans got exactly what they deserved.
You and your hatred for these Puritans, like.
So they got the kinky butt probing ones,
just like rubber lips,
and they're still alive somehow on the ships. They've saved them.
Dude, I'm telling you, that just brings, the more you talk about that, like Mothership Zeta from Fallout, it just brings back so many memories. This was fun.
Good shit on that Lost Colony of Roanoke.
It gets wild.
It does. And it's like one of those choose your own adventure stories. If you want to believe aliens abducted an entire colony of people, by all means, nobody's going to stop you.
It happened.
It's just as plausible as them assimilating with Native American tribes.
Yeah, and that whole thing comes from like reports of the Jamestown settlers seeing some. I don't know if they ever confirmed it.
Yeah, like white.
In passing though, like, and they would notice like Native Americans with like European features, like
light colored skin, blonde hair,
blue eyes. Right? Yeah, like, like where did you? So
what's going on over there with those chaps?
Yeah, basically.
But thanks for joining us on this episode of Shadows and Sightings. As always, you can find us on Instagram, Shadows and Sightings Pod, Facebook, Shadows and Sightings, a paranormal podcast, or send us an email, shadowsandsightings@gmail.com. My goodness, we are rolling along into the holidays. This is a little Thanksgiving-esque kind of episode.
It's kind of breaking into like the sort of what we got coming up in these next couple of weeks.
Yeah. I'm excited to dig into some of these folklore tales. Some good holiday themed stuff coming at you in the next couple of weeks. So we hope you all are enjoying the show so far. If you are, leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. It helps boost us in the algorithms, and hopefully will get us listened to by more people who are our little spooky community out there.
And we notice that you guys are listening. We can see that, like, you guys are subscribing and you're
downloading the episodes.
So we appreciate you guys taking the time. And if you have friends, that are interested in the same things that we talk about, spread the word, because it's growing, and that's awesome. We're kind of building.
So hop on board now, man.
We're building a community.
You can say that you were there from day freaking one. Like Nick was saying, we thank you guys so much for listening to our little show here. We'll talk to you next time when we talk about all things spooky.